I'll start by saying there are fundamental differences between accreditation and rankings. I'll mention a few of these. Accreditation, as Professor Surendra Prasad has pointed out, is essentially a peer review mechanism conducted by a national accreditation agency. It happens in several countries. Many of them are members of the Washington Accord, signatories to the Washington Accord, and many others are waiting to become signatories of the Washington Accord. It is much more exhaustive and comprehensive than rankings. It involves, first of all, a self-review report, on-site visit and analysis, and decision is accredited or not accredited. NBA, it has a further classification, accredited for 5 years or 2 years, depending upon the attainment of a certain number of points or marks out of a total number of 100. NBA and ABET, which is the US accreditation agency, and similar accreditation is performed after 2 batches have graduated, not before that. Before that, there are quality assurance mechanisms, but accreditation starts only after 2 batches have graduated. That means after 5 years of the existence of that particular institution. On the other hand, ranking is performed by global and national ranking agencies. National ranking agencies are usually the magazines, but now MHRD has come up with a national ranking system. Professor Surendra Prasad was the chairman of this effort. Now, the global ranking agencies, they are a triad of 3 major agencies which are considered to be the gold standard. One is the ARW, Academic Ranking of World Universities, performed by the Continuing Education Department of the Shanghai Jiaotong University in China. The second one is the THE, which is the Times Higher Education Rankings. And the third one is QS, Quacquarelli-Simons. Both of them are headquartered in the UK. In addition, we know that every year, magazines like India Today or GUIC or many of them, they publish DataQuest, they publish their own rankings. Now, how are these rankings published? On what basis do they create these rankings? Essentially, they also have a set of criteria and weightings. Nowadays, they have become transparent. They tell you exactly under each criterion, for each weighting, how many points points these institutions get. What is the basis for coming to these decisions? Essentially, statistics provided by the institutions, and more AICT insists that there will be voluntary disclosure. Therefore, this data is available on the website, or they can seek the information from the institutions. Sometimes these statistics are validated by visits to some institutions. For example, the awards that were given yesterday by CII and AICTE on the industry-linked institutions, the jury initially shortlisted a number of these colleges on the basis of the data provided by them. Subsequently, visiting teams visited these institutions to validate not the claims, validate the information given by these institutions. And then they prepare ranking lists. Ranking is typically done annually. THE released their BRICS annual rankings just a few days ago. In addition, there is something called rating. CRISIL, which is which rates the financial institutions. It also rates educational institutions on the basis of identified or given criteria. Now we have started having for this country a national ranking system. Professor Surendra Prasad was the chairman of the AICTE committee, which actually came up with these rankings. Let's first examine the rationale for coming up with an India-specific ranking system. It is mainly because our universities and institutions are not among the top ranked institutions in the world. Let us recognize that. We may give any kind of an excuse, but this is the real reason for that. Now, globally, as I mentioned, there is a triad of recognized, established, credible ranking system, the ARW, THE, and QS. Now, the claim is, or the excuse is, that these ranking systems do not contain India's relevant parameters. And in particular, for example, our contribution to enhance inclusion and diversity through affirmative action. That is one of the reasons. A suitable national ranking authority, it is proposed to be constituted to oversee the implementation of this national institutional ranking framework. A strategy is proposed for calculating quantitative scores to measure the performance of an institution across several relevant parameters, particularly relevant to India, in order to obtain an overall score. A system for data collection from public bodies and random sample sets is proposed for each parameter to establish the credibility of the information collected. Now, these parameters are organized into 5 broad heads, and they have been further elaborated into suitable subheads. Each broad head has an overall weight assigned to it. What are these 5 broad heads? 1, teaching, learning, and resources, 30% weightage. Research, professional practice, and collaborative performance, again 30%. Graduation outcomes, 15%. Outreach and inclusivity, this is where I mentioned that this becomes India relevant, 15%, and perception, 10%. Shanghai rankings do not have any weightage for perception. That means how international academics perceive these institutions to be. Now, there are some details of how this should be evaluated, but both THE and QS have up to 40% of their ranking weights are for perception. How your institution is perceived, what kind of a visibility has it achieved, what kind of a brand has it created. India again loses out on these things, because even though we think that our institutions are great, there are many countries where they do not know about the Indian institutions. In India, of course, as you know, it's a large country. There are diversities of different types, and therefore, even in the rankings, just as in accreditation, the institutions are classified into 2 different types in order for the rankings to be applied to each class of institutions. One is autonomous institutions, and the other are affiliated institutions. As you know, when you're talking about continuous improvement, you're looking for change. And change can happen reasonably quickly only in autonomous institutions. In affiliated institutions, it takes very long. From every platform, every respected academic has called for autonomy. Even TechQuip demands that the institutions be autonomous before the grants can be given. But it is only about 10% of the institutions which have got autonomy. Nationally, only about 5% of our colleges in higher education have autonomy. 95% do not have autonomy. This is very similar to the Tier 1 and Tier 2 that exists in accreditation. Tier 1 is for autonomous institutions, and Tier 2 is for affiliated institutions. A point to note is, while India has become a signatory to the Washington Accord, it only recognizes Tier 1 institutions which are affiliated by NBA, not Tier 2 institutions. They have to move to Tier 1 institutions by becoming autonomous, and then they can qualify. There are several benefits of being a signatory to the Washington Accord, particularly international mobility that was discussed last session. Now, the autonomous and affiliated institutions are ranked using the same criteria. Now, the recognition is that autonomous institutions do both research and teaching, whereas for affiliated institutions, the basic task is for teaching. You must also recognize that when global rankings take place, not every institution is actually ignoring or giving up the mandate with which it was started. I'll mention a few things about it a little later on. One of our major achievements in undergraduate technical education, as Professor Murthy was talking about in the last session, was the success of our undergraduates from our best institutions. A question was asked why our BTechs do not join the MTech programs. But the fact of the matter is there are many BTechs who have done their post-graduation and doctorate degrees abroad who have come back. Many of the IITs are populated with their own BTech graduates who have got additional qualifications from abroad. Is that a good thing or not? Now, therefore, the brain drain is no longer considered to be a melody. It is considered to be a brain bank or a brain circulation. And increasingly, IIT graduates in IIT Bombay, they mentioned that 60% of the graduates wanted to stay back and start up their own companies. Now, there are some quotations by eminent people on what rankings should do, on what rankings should not do. Ellen Hazelcorn, many of you might know this if you are in the field of rankings and quality. She is a professor at the University of Dublin, written a book. Also, she talks extensively about, and she identifies the lacunae in rankings also. She asks herself this question and she answers, how much attention should universities and governments pay to rankings? It's a very relevant question for India. She has a list of do's and don'ts. I'll mention 2 do's and 3 don'ts. Do's. First of all, ensure your higher education system or institution has a coherent strategy or mission aligned with national values and objectives. Therefore, rankings which do not have country-specific factors, she says that you look at your institution and the mandate with which you have been created. Use rankings only as part of an overall quality assurance assessment or benchmarking system, and never as a standalone evaluation tool. Many institutions, particularly in the Southeast Asian region, consider a higher ranking to be so desirable that they'll forsake all other responsibilities and then work only towards increasing their ranking. Well, if you look at it in the final outcome, they come up high on rankings. But then if you go deeper, have you forsaken something? Have you given up a few other mission statements in order to achieve this? Well, that's a question to be answered. Don't seek to change your institution's mission or national strategy in order to conform to the rankings. Don't direct resources to a few elite universities and neglect the needs of the wider higher education sector and society. This is for countries and nations who participate in these rankings. Don't manipulate public information and data in order to rise in the tables. So you'll recognize from this that rankings are extremely controversial. In Europe, which has the Bologna agreement, for instance, for rationalizing the different national education systems, there is a university systems ranking which bases its decisions on 6 criteria. I'll just mention the criteria, won't go into the details. Then you will see how there are such different perceptions throughout the world on the efficacy of rankings. What are these 6 criteria? Inclusiveness, access, effectiveness, attractiveness, age range of the students, and responsiveness. How responsive are these institutions for undertaking change? So GER also comes into the picture. Therefore, rankings are much more controversial than accreditation, but they've come here to stay. The VC's office in any institution or the president's office spends a considerable amount of effort to look at the rankings and wanting to move up. I'll leave there, and if there are any other points for discussion, I'll mention a few more things.